The snow didn't fall. It drifted, like ash from something long dead. Hollis Brant leaned into the wind, reins slack in his gloved hand, his gelding's hooves muffled beneath powder that swallowed prints as quick as they were made. The road into Dry Bell had never felt longer, or lonelier. He'd sold the last of his good cattle a week back, traded a silver pocket watch with a horse's head etched on it for a threadbare coat and one hot meal in Glenmore. Now, with what coin he had left, he'd come to buy a winter-strong horse. That was the plan, anyhow. No use surviving the plains with a lame mount, and his was getting there, favoring the front left with a limp Hollis couldn't fix no matter how long he wrapped it each morning. Dry Bell was smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he was just larger with sorrow now, and nothing could feel right-sized again. The church steeple leaned, warped from last year's ice storm, and the general store sagged like an old mouth with missing teeth. As he passed, curtains twitched. Eyes watched. He'd forgotten how quiet a place could be when you arrived unannounced. At the livery, Miss Laureen looked up from sorting bridles and spat into a tin pail. Her face was as sharp as ever, lined like river rock. "Well, I'll be. Hollis Brant." "Ma'am." He tipped his hat. Snow had settled on the brim, unshaken. "You here for something, or just riding nostalgia?" "Need a horse. One that won't drop dead in the next blizzard." She snorted. "You and half the county." He glanced at the stalls. "What about that bay?" "Out of your price range, and she knows it." Her eyes glinted. "Got an old gelding I'd part with for cheap. Bit sway-backed, but he'll haul a man if you don't mind a rickety ride." Silence filled the space between them like cold breath. Hollis didn't flinch. "I heard about Ellie," she said after a moment softer. "The fever took a lot of good women." Hollis gave a nod that could have meant anything. The ache rose like it always did, slow and bitter behind the ribs. "I don't mind rickety," he said. Miss Laureen squinted. "You know, if you ain't set on a horse, there's a widow out past the old schoolhouse. Got ponies. Good ones. She ain't selling exactly, but she's got mouths to feed. Might be you two could strike a deal." "Name?" "Elia Grace Waverly. Sister to that homesteader what died in the Canyon Lands last spring. Took in his kids and her sisters, too. 6 in all, I think. Up on Waverly Hill." The name hung in the air, thick with snow and something more. Hollis touched the brim of his hat again, turned without a word, and led his gelding down the road. It took an hour to reach the hill, the snow thicker, as the trail narrowed. Pines lined the rise like sentinels. Wind whispered through them, the sound of secrets too old for language. The Waverly place stood gray and square at the top, shutters barely clinging, fence mended with rope and grace, smoke rising from a chimney in a thin, stubborn curl. He dismounted, boots crunching into the icy crust. His gelding stood still behind him, head low. The door opened before he knocked. She was there. Elia Waverly had the look of someone who hadn't slept in years, but still remembered how to carry herself like a lady. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes sharp as Winter Creek water. A baby rested on her hip, face round and pink, swaddled tight. Behind her, the glow of a fire. Somewhere deeper inside, a child coughed, then hushed. "I was told you had ponies," Hollis said, voice low. She studied him. "You buying?" "If I can afford it." "We don't sell what we can't live without." "That makes 2 of us." A long moment passed between them. The baby stirred. Elia glanced down, adjusted the blanket, then looked back up. "Come in. You can at least get warm." The house smelled of boiled beans and wood smoke. The floor creaked as he stepped in. 5 children sat at a rough-hewn table, their eyes wide and unblinking. A girl, maybe 11, rose to pull another chair forward but kept her gaze down. "I'm Hollis Brant," he said, removing his hat. "Just passing through." "Elia Grace," she replied. "That's Millie Boone, Cass, Jojo, and Thistle." Each name came with a gesture to a child who barely nodded. Thistle, the smallest, had dirt on her cheeks and a curl that wouldn't stay tucked. She hugged a rag doll tighter than a bank man to his coin purse. "I've only one pony," Elia said once he was seated. "Strong but old. She plows. Doesn't run." "I don't run either," Hollis replied. She offered a thin smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Then maybe you'll understand her." Boone, the oldest boy, tilted his head. "You look like a man who had land once." "Did?" Hollis warmed his hands by the stove. "Wind took it. Then fire. Then the woman I loved." Boone nodded solemnly, as if he knew too much about losses stacked like that. Later, she took him out back to see the pony. A stout brown mare with a dip in her spine and cloudy eyes. Hollis laid a hand on her neck. She didn't shy. She knows winter's hard, Elia said, but she still wakes up. She got a name. Used to. Now she just comes when I whistle. He could afford her. She wasn't worth the coin, not on paper, but something in her stillness called to him. He turned toward the house, snow beginning to fall again in lazy spirals. The sound of laughter drifted from the kitchen. It startled him. I won't take her tonight, he said. Elia raised a brow. There's storm in that wind, he added. If you've a barn, I'll sleep there. Move on in the morning. She considered him, then nodded. There's hay. Blankets, too. Boone'll show you. Back inside, he caught one last glance, Millie handing the baby a carved wooden horse, its legs chipped but painted with care. Boone led him out with a lantern and wordless purpose. In the barn, Hollis spread the blanket near the mare's stall and settled in. Snow tapped the roof above, soft as breath. He lay there in silence, listening to a place where voices still mattered, where someone sang low and sweet to calm the baby's cry, where wood popped and hissed in the hearth, where footsteps creaked with weight, but not with weariness alone. He hadn't come for this. He hadn't come for anything but a horse. But maybe the heart had reasons that Coin didn't understand. And maybe, just maybe, this hill, snowbound and stubborn, had waited for a man like him. He didn't sleep for a long while. But when he did, he dreamed of a table with 6 empty chairs, slowly filling. One by one, the morning broke slow and white, the sun a pale ghost behind thick clouds. Hollis woke to the creak of timbers, the pony shifting in her stall, and a rooster's call that sounded more like protest than song. He sat up, the borrowed quilt falling from his shoulders, and flexed his fingers until the cold bled out. Snow had climbed up to the barn doors overnight, sealing the world in silence. He stepped outside, boots crunching, and saw Elia already at the well, hauling water with arms that trembled but did not fail. Her sleeves were rolled, her braid tucked into a wool scarf. She didn't look his way until he spoke. You work harder than most men I've known. She blinked the cold from her lashes. Most men I've known left when work got real. The silence after held 100 things unsaid. Hollis nodded toward the rope. Let me take a turn. Elia hesitated, then handed him the bucket without a word. It was heavy with ice-ringed wood and winter's weight. He drew water with a steady rhythm, each pull a small offering. Later, inside the house, the air smelled of cornbread and wood smoke. Children huddled near the fire, whispering as they watched him through wary eyes. The baby gurgled in a cradle made from a broken barrel and some clever carpentry. Hollis hadn't asked, but he guessed Elia built it herself. He sat near the stove, hands stretched toward the warmth. Millie approached first, her steps careful. She offered him a small wooden horse, no bigger than a matchbox, its legs uneven, one ear chipped. I made this, she whispered, for the baby, but she's too little. Hollis took it with both hands, like a sacred thing. He's got heart, he said. She. Well, he smiled. She's got more than heart. She's got grit. Millie grinned and slipped away before her mother could scold her for lingering. Boone came next, not with kindness, but curiosity masked as challenge. You gonna stay? I'm just waiting out the storm. You fix things? Boone asked. When they're broke and worth the effort. Boone nodded like a man taking stock. Roof's leaking in Mama's room. I'll look at it. By noon, Hollis was on the ladder, hammering shingles into a sky that threatened more snow. He worked with quiet purpose, the cold biting but not cruel. Below, Jojo ran out barefoot and was scooped up by Elia so fast Hollis almost missed it. He doesn't feel cold like others, she said to him later, rubbing the boy's feet near the fire. Lost 2 toes last year. We learned our lesson. You got more grit than most folks in town. We don't got the luxury of softness. There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact, laid bare. Hollis respected it. The day passed in small tasks. He mended a fence rail, split kindling, and coaxed a laugh from Thistle with a clumsy puppet made of mittens and twine. By sunset, the house had shifted. He wasn't part of them, not yet, but neither was he a stranger anymore. That night, as they ate beans and cornbread by lamplight, Elia spoke, without looking up. You can sleep in the loft tonight. Warmer than the barn. Hollis didn't ask what had changed. He simply nodded. After the children were tucked in, he sat at the edge of the hearth, rubbing warmth back into his fingers. Elia stitched by the firelight, needle moving like memory, steady, quiet, unspoken. He watched her hands. Not her face. Just the grace in her fingers. "How long's it been since you had a man under this roof?" he asked softly. She didn't flinch. "Long enough to forget what it feels like to wait on one." "I'm not expecting anything." "I know," she said, not unkindly. They sat like that, silence thick between them. The baby stirred in her cradle, but did not cry. Then came a knock, 3 sharp raps, like judgment come calling. Elia stiffened. Hollis stood, every muscle remembering the wariness life had taught him. She opened the door just wide enough to see. Reverend Merkel stood in the snow, face red from wind, holding a basket. "Thought you might need flour," he said, then glanced past her and saw Hollis. "Well now," he muttered. "Didn't know you had company." Elia stepped outside and closed the door behind her. Their voices carried only faintly through the wall. Hollis didn't listen, but he felt it. The tone, the pause, the sting of eyes that judge faster than they bless. She came back in with the basket and a flush on her cheeks that had nothing to do with cold. "You're the talk of town already," she said, her voice tight. "A man spends one night here, and suddenly I'm a harlot with no decency. You want me gone?" She paused, and the pause was longer than he liked. "You can leave in the morning." It stung more than it should have. Hollis nodded once and returned to the fire, unsure what to say. Boone watched from the corner, his jaw clenched. When the children were asleep and the house lay quiet again, Elia brought him a blanket and a lantern for the loft. He climbed the ladder, boots tucked under his arm, and spread the blanket on the floorboards. The roof creaked above, the snow piling on. Wind howled, and something in him felt hollow. Then came the sound, soft dragging steps. Jojo appeared at the top of the ladder, holding a crooked quilt stitched with red stars. He said nothing, just placed it beside Hollis, and turned to go. "Jojo," Hollis said, voice low. The boy turned. "Thanks." Jojo nodded and vanished. Hollis laid back, wrapping the red stars around his shoulders, staring at the wooden ceiling above. He could still smell beans and cedar smoke in the folds of the blanket. He could still feel the weight of Elia's disappointment, heavy but not final. Outside, the storm picked up. The barn creaked in protest. The night deepened. And somewhere in the darkness below, a woman with 6 burdens too many sat alone by a dying fire, stitching for tomorrow like it might just be worth mending. Hollis Brant closed his eyes, listening to the hush of snow and the fragile breathing of a house too full for loneliness and too empty for pride. He did not know what morning would bring, but he wasn't leaving just yet. Morning came slow and gray, thick with hush. Snow covered everything, a fresh, merciless sweep that buried even yesterday's tracks. From the loft, Hollis heard the clatter of pans and the thump of firewood. He lay a moment longer, wrapped in Jojo's red star quilt, the scent of cedar and worn cotton wrapped around him like something remembered. By the time he came down, Elia had the stove hot and the children mostly dressed. Cass was struggling with her bootlaces, Boone spooned porridge with a soldier's precision, and Thistle clung to Millie's skirt, sleepy and mute. Hollis stepped in with quiet boots and rolled up sleeves. "I'll fetch more wood," he said, not waiting for permission. Elia glanced at him, the flicker of a nod barely visible before she turned back to pouring tea. The snow outside was heavier than he expected, wet and clinging, the kind that soaked through sleeves and stung the knuckles. He carried in 2 armloads and stacked it neat by the door. When he returned for the third, Boone trailed him without a word, hands shoved deep into patched coat pockets. "You ever chop?" Hollis asked. Boone shrugged. "That a no or a maybe?" "I've watched Mama do it." Hollis handed him a smaller axe. "Time you learned." The rhythm of the blade cracking wood was steady, the sound satisfying. Hollis showed him how to keep the feet wide, elbows loose. Boone nodded once, took in every word, without complaint. The boy had the look of someone who didn't know what childhood was meant to be, and didn't ask to be told. When the stack grew tall and tidy, Hollis clapped snow from his coat and stepped back inside. Elia didn't speak, but her eyes rested on Boone for a beat longer than needed. That was thanks enough. The afternoon unfolded in quiet gestures. Hollis mended the chicken coop, which had lost a plank. Millie brought him twine. Cass offered a hammer. Even Thistle stood nearby holding nails in her little mittened fist, proud just to help. Elia stayed inside, nursing the baby, stirring soup, moving through rooms like wind, felt but not always seen. But when Hollis came in to wash his hands, he saw it. Her wedding ring, still on her finger. She caught him looking. "It stays." He nodded. "Ain't my business." "No," she said, "it isn't." That night, over stew, Thistle spilled her cup and started to cry. Hollis knelt to clean it before Elia could rise. He used his sleeve and a rag and mopped up without a word. When he finished, Thistle climbed into his lap, curled there like she'd been doing it for years. The table fell still. Boone set down his spoon. Elia looked away. Later, after the children had been tucked in and the silence returned, she joined him at the hearth. "You can't stay." He didn't move. "Because of the Reverend." "Because of the town," she said. "Because of what they'll think. What they're already saying. Let 'em talk. I have 6 children to raise. No husband. No ring for you. I know how women get ruined in towns like this. Doesn't take much. A few whispers. A few looks. You think I don't?" Her voice cracked then, just a little. "I think you mean well, Mr. Brant. But I don't need your help turning the tide. I need you to know when to leave." He nodded. Not from agreement, but from recognition. "I had a wife once," he said. "Ellie. She died in the spring. Fever took her fast. We buried her by the peach tree out past the barn. I sat beside her grave every day till summer. Then I sold the land. Couldn't stay. Couldn't leave either. So I just drifted." Elia said nothing, but her hands stopped stitching. "She was pregnant," he added. 8 months. The baby didn't make it." Elia's breath hitched. She set her sewing aside. "I don't tell that for pity," Hollis said. "I tell it because I know what silence does when it stays too long. It rots things. Makes you forget how to speak without shaking." The fire cracked. A log shifted. "I don't want to stay if it'll cost you," he continued. "But I won't lie. I never felt more myself than I have here. With your children. With your quiet." She reached for the teapot and poured him a cup. Her fingers brushed his. "Just one more night. Until the storm passes." "Just one," he said, and didn't believe it for a second. In the morning, they woke to Reverend Merkel again, this time on horseback, coat flapping, his boots muddy despite the snow. He didn't come to the door. He waited by the gate, arms crossed. Hollis saw him first from the barn window and went to meet him. "Town stirring," the Reverend said. "Some folks are whispering things no good man should let stand." Hollis met his eyes. "You here to warn her? Or to scare her?" "I'm here because I care about her soul. And yours." Hollis bit down hard on a retort. "She's got more soul than anyone in that town. Doesn't change what folks see. I'll be gone by dusk." Merkel seemed satisfied. "Good. For her sake, Cowboy. Not yours." As the horse trotted off, Hollis stood still, snow settling on his shoulders like judgment. Boone watched from the fence post. That afternoon, Hollis began packing. Not much to gather: blanket, saddlebag, knife, the wooden horse Millie had given him. He strapped it to his gear, like a charm. The children circled him, not understanding but sensing something was ending. "You have to go?" Cass asked. "Your mama's right," he said gently. "I've stayed too long." Jojo offered him an apple from their store. Millie slipped a note in his coat pocket. Boone shook his hand, rough and firm, a man's grip in a boy's frame. Elia stood by the door, arms crossed. "Not cold, just bracing." "You said just one night," she murmured. "I know. Then why does this feel like goodbye?" Hollis met her gaze, soft and steady. "Because neither of us knows how to stay without breaking." She nodded once, just once, and stepped aside. He left with the storm easing, the snow light, the sky the color of bruised lilac. He did not look back, but the red stars on the quilt stayed in his mind, and the weight of her silence traveled with him down the hill. The sky had cleared by the following morning, but the cold clung stubborn. Hollis rode toward town on the borrowed pony, its pace slow, as if reluctant too. The snowpack glittered in the early light, unspoiled and quiet, and for a long stretch there was no sound but the creak of tack and the slow rhythm of hooves on crusted ice. He passed the church. The bell didn't ring, but the front doors stood open like a mouth about to speak. Near the general store, folks turned to look. Conversations halted mid-word. A man like Hollis, bearded, dust-bitten, with no kin and no farm, had no business hanging around a widow's home past a storm. And everyone in Drybell knew it. Miss Laureen stood on the porch with a crate of canned peaches in hand. She narrowed her eyes at him like a woman inspecting mold on her preserves. "Back already?" "Just picking up supplies," he said, nodding toward the store. "Oh, is that what they call it now?" Her voice carried like frost on a window pane, sharp but slow to crack. He didn't answer. just dismounted and walked inside. The clerk, younger than the flour sacks stacked in back, tried not to make eye contact as he rang up coffee, beans, flour, and a tin of peppermint candies. Hollis handed over coin, without counting. "Reckon this'll last a while," the boy said. "Storm ain't quite done." The boy hesitated. "Folks been saying things. About you. About the widow." Hollis looked at him, calm, level, the way you look at a match before striking it. "Let him say it to my face next time." He packed the goods tight into his saddlebag and rode out, ignoring the stares, the whispers curling like smoke behind him. Back at Waverly Hill, the children met him at the gate like he was a returning soldier. Boone reached for the supplies before Hollis could dismount, and Millie beamed at the peppermint tin like it was gold. Elia stood on the porch, arms folded, shawl wrapped tight, unreadable. "You came back," she said. "Snow's still deep. Figured the pony could use a few more days' rest." She nodded once. "You didn't have to bring all that." "I know." Inside, the fire welcomed him like it remembered. He unpacked the goods onto the table. Jojo picked through them reverently, holding up the tin of candies as if it might sing. That night, the warmth settled deep. Hollis sharpened knives while Elia read aloud from a book with frayed corners. Boone leaned against his shoulder, half asleep. The baby cooed softly in her makeshift cradle. But even comfort grows brittle under scrutiny. A knock came the next morning, heavier than Merkel's. Hollis opened the door to find Sheriff Dyer standing with his hat in hand, eyes serious but not unkind. "I won't take much of your time," the sheriff said. "Mind if I come in?" Elia nodded stiffly and moved aside. Dyer entered with the weight of someone who disliked his errand. He stood by the fire, gaze drifting over the children, then settling on Hollis. "Word in town's gotten loud," he began. "People talk. Say a man staying with a widow's a certain kind of man." Elia straightened. "And what kind is that, Sheriff?" "Not my judgment," he said quickly. "But it started to stir trouble. You got folks who think maybe children ought not be raised with scandal breathing through the windows." Hollis didn't flinch. "You here to run me off?" "I'm here to warn you. There's a few men talking about bringing a petition to the church council. And if that starts, it won't stop at gossip. They want to take my children." Elia's voice was low, but it trembled. "Not yet," Dyer said. "But they'll try to ruin your standing. Make it harder to get supplies. Harder to survive." A long silence fell, thick as chimney soot. "I've known you a long time, Elia," Dyer added softer now. "You've done right by every child under this roof. But pride won't keep them warm. And it sure won't keep this town kind." She nodded once, then turned away. After Dyer left, she didn't speak. She cleaned the table, wiped the counters, lit the lamps as if it were any other day. But her hands moved too fast, too hard. At supper, she barely touched her food. That night, after the children were asleep, she stepped out onto the porch. Hollis followed, wrapping himself in his coat. Snow drifted from the overhang, tapping the rail like a slow metronome. "They want to shame me for being a woman who needed help," she said. "They want to shame you for not breaking," he replied. Her shoulders rose, then fell. "I've buried 2 sisters and a husband. I've carried 6 children through drought and disease and winter. But I still get judged for letting a man carry a bucket of water into my kitchen." Hollis stared out at the dark, then said, "You're not the one who ought to feel shame." She turned to face him then, her eyes sharp as frostlit glass. "Why are you still here, Hollis?" "Because I ain't got a place that wants me. But I found one that needs me." He didn't reach for her, didn't step closer. But the words hung there between breath and heartbeat. A wind swept across the ridge, howling like it knew old names. She looked down at her hands. "If you stay, they'll say worse. Do worse. I've lived through worse." She took a slow breath, then looked back at the house, golden with lamplight. "If they come, if they try to take them, I won't let 'em." Her mouth quivered. She bit her lip and nodded once. He turned to leave, but she caught his sleeve. Just for a moment. Just enough to say what her mouth would not. The fire inside hadn't dimmed. It glowed steady behind frostbitten windows, feeding warmth to a house half held together by grace. It would take more than whispers to blow it out. By dawn, the town's first move would come. But that night, they stood together under a snowfall too gentle to break anything. They came just after sunrise, while frost still clung to the porch rail, and the baby was nestled against Elia's breast, nursing in half-sleep. 6 men on horseback, wrapped in wool and judgment, with Reverend Merkel at the lead. No guns drawn, yet, but the way their reins were tight and eyes sharper than fence wire, Hollis knew what this was. He stepped onto the porch before they dismounted. His boots scraped against the wood, breath visible in the cold. Elia came to stand beside him, the baby now swaddled in one arm, her free hand curled into a fist around nothing at all. Reverend Merkel cleared his throat. "We've come to talk sense, Elia." "You brought a posse to talk?" Hollis asked, calm but firm. "Some things require community witness," Merkel said. "We've heard things, seen things. A man sleeping under a widow's roof for weeks. Children confused about who's raising them. Morals called into question." Hollis felt Elia stiffen beside him. She didn't speak. Not yet. Another man stepped forward, Jed Salter, a rancher with more opinions than cattle. "We've got kids too, Brant. We don't want our boys asking why a stranger gets to move into a house full of girls and call it holy. That what you think I'm doing?" Hollis's voice had lowered to something dangerous. "Taking instead of tending." Merkel's horse shifted beneath him. The church can't sit quiet. Not when there's whispers of impropriety. "Elia, you've got children to think of. This ain't just your name, it's their future." Elia raised her chin, voice clear and cold. "I've fed every one of them with hands blistered from snow, from soap, from sewing, until my fingers bled. I have done nothing but raise these children with dignity, and he," she nodded toward Hollis, "has only ever helped us survive. Quietly, without asking anything." "She's right," Hollis said. "I didn't ask. I didn't push. I didn't claim." Jed sneered. "But you're still here, aren't you? Still standing on her porch like a husband without a name." Silence fell. A hawk called out from the ridge, circling above. Then Hollis stepped forward, hat in his hand, coat dusted with snow, and faced the men like they were a jury already reaching for the noose. "Fine," he said. "You want to know who I am? I'm a man who lost his wife, lost his land, lost his child. I wandered till my bones forgot what a home felt like. And then I found 6 kids who didn't ask for anything except maybe one soul who wouldn't leave before dawn. I chopped wood. I patched fences. I stayed up when they cried. I didn't touch a woman who didn't invite me. But I stood guard over her house like it was a church." Merkel opened his mouth, but Hollis kept speaking. "I'll leave if that's what she wants. But not because of you. Not because of your sermons or sideways glances or God passed down through gossip. If I go, it's with my head high and her dignity untouched. You want to shame someone, you'll do it to my face, not hers." The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice wind. Boone opened the door then, holding Jojo's hand. Millie and Cass came behind them, their faces solemn, eyes too knowing. Thistle clutched the leg of Elia's skirt, peeking out with fear and stubbornness all mixed together. Boone stepped off the porch, shoulders square. He walked to Hollis's side and stood there, chin up. "He's our family," the boy said. "He never asked to be. But he is." Cass followed, her small hand sliding into Hollis's. Millie wrapped her arms around his leg. Jojo clutched the peppermint tin Hollis had given him like it was a talisman. And then Elia stepped forward, too. Past shame. Past fear. She faced the men with her spine straight as cedar. "If the cost of peace is sending away the only decent man these children have ever known, then I don't want your peace," she said. "I'd rather raise them in the teeth of every blizzard than bend my life around your narrow eyes." Her words hung there, trembling with power. One of the riders, old Tom Barrow, who'd lost his wife the year before, nodded once. He turned his horse and rode off. The others followed slowly, shamed not by a crime, but by their own cowardice. Merkel lingered the longest, but even he knew when a sermon had lost its steam. He tugged his reins and disappeared down the hill. Hollis stood there a long while the children pressed around him like roots growing into something solid. Elia reached for his hand, and this time she didn't let go. That evening the wind changed. Snow melted slow under eaves. The baby slept with her fist curled around Hollis's little carve horse. Boone whittled near the fire. Elia braided Millie's hair, her fingers gentle now, unhurried. Hollis sat in a chair built for a man who once thought he had no place left in the world. Later, when the moon spilled silver across the hills and the house sighed in its sleep, Elia walked out onto the porch and found him sitting quiet. "They'll still talk," she said. "Let 'em. They'll say we broke rules. They are not wrong." She smiled, tired and radiant. Then maybe some rules needed breaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the little note Millie had given him on the day he left. He hadn't opened it until now. He unfolded the crumpled paper and held it between them. "Stay. We still got room." The words were misspelled, written in charcoal, edges smudged. But they held more welcome than any prayer. He folded it again and tucked it back into his chest pocket. "I ain't leaving," he said. "Not again." She leaned into him then, just her head against his shoulder. No kiss, no fanfare, just peace. The fire inside crackled low. The baby stirred once, then stilled. Snow whispered across the roof like a lullaby. And in that quiet, with 6 children asleep, and a woman whose strength had never needed rescue, Hollis Brant became something he hadn't been in years. A man who belonged. Somewhere. To someone. Not claimed by law or oath, but by the quiet, daily decision to stay. To love without asking. To build without boasting. To show up when the world expected you to walk away. That was the kind of man he'd become. And Dry Bell, whether it liked it or not, would learn to live with that.